Welcome to the first video in my Firewall Deep Dive series. First of all, I just want to say, I think that some people think firewall and they get intimidated. And as you're going to see as we work through this, it's not really something to be intimidated about. It's kind of like learning another language. And once you learn that, you'll become fluent in this. You'll understand by looking at the rules what's going on. And so real quick, let's go ahead and sign in and let's get started. Sign into our router. And then we're going to go over to the Firewall NAT tab. And then we're going to go to the Firewall Policies. Okay? And so what a firewall policy is it's a set of rules for how we handle traffic on interfaces, and it has a default action. So with the EdgeMax or the EdgeRouter, EdgeOS, the firewall policies are applied before SNAT or Source Network Address Translation and after DNAT or Destination Network Address Translation. And what we're going to look at in this first video, I'm going to try to keep this one short because then when we start creating rules, that's when these videos will get a little longer. So what I want to do is I want to go over this interface, and I'm going to explain to you at face value what is sitting here. So you have a button that says add rule set, so we can add a rule set, and then you have your buttons here that talk about what the rules are. So if it's a drop, a default action of drop, then it's going to show up here. If it's a default action or reject, they would show up here. If it's a default action of accept, it would show up here. All is going to show you all of the rule sets. Now, you see here under name where this says WAN_in and this says WAN_local. This right here, this could say anything. Now, Ubiquiti uses this by default, so I like to kind of stay with what the manufacturer does when it comes to naming. That way, if anybody else who is familiar with the product logs in, they can kind of see what's going on. Or, in the name, I will use something that is very short and direct and to the point as to what does this rule set do. So, you can see that this rule set, and by the way, these two rules, if you've been watching the videos, these were created using the WAN plus 2LAN 2 setup wizard. So we have WAN in and WAN local. So let's open this up and take a look. Well, before we do that, so you can see the interfaces that this is assigned to is ETH0 and the direction is in. WAN local is ETH0 local traffic. There are two rules in each. The default action is drop. Under your action drop down, you've got all of these choices, so you can delete this rule set. But I will tell you, if you try to do this, we should get an error. Let's see. Okay, cannot delete rule set WAN in, still in use. So there are rules and it's applied to interfaces, so you can't delete it. So it's actually a nice built-in, feature to protect us from ourselves. We can copy the rule set if we've got some rules in there that we kind of like and we just want to create an exact copy and then modify it to have it do something else. We can look at the stats on these rules. So when we bring this up, oh, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but so when I clicked on stats, it brought up this other menu, and it's the rule set configuration for WAN in. But see how these four are in blue, and then you have those four same tabs here. So edit rule set, configuration, interfaces, and stats are all represented by a tab as well, but the copy rule set and delete rule set are not. Okay, so our stats. You can see the rule number, and you can sort Rule number 1 has had 910,412 packets. This is how many bytes, and the action is accept, allow, establish, related. So you can see we are passing the majority of our traffic through this rule. And if you also remember the way that this is created, that the default action is to drop, and allow, establish, related is to accept. So you can see most of the packets, well, all the packets so far that we're seeing have all hit that accept rule. Alright, so over to the rules. Let's take a look at this. So the firewall will read these rules in order, which is why you see the Save Rule Order button over here. When you create different rules, you can order the rules differently and then save that rule order. You can see this is rule number 1, and it's checking, the description is allow, establish, related. Source is, there's no source specified or destination, so it's basically all traffic. Default action is accept. So we could edit this. So there's a menu inside of a menu. So you get into the rules. So this box is the configuration for the rule set itself. Okay, so we have our rules where we can add our rules. Then we have the configuration, and the name is WAN in, and the description is WAN to internal. Our default action is drop. Once again, when you're in EdgeOS and you see this blue asterisk, this is a required field, and you can log it. Then you get over here to the interfaces, and this rule set applies to ETH0, which is my WAN interface, and the direction is in. One more quick thing about the interfaces and the direction. So you select your interface, but then the direction choices that you have are in, out, or local. So in is going to be inbound packets. Out would be outbound packets. Now, remember, it's all tied to that interface. And then local will be local packets on the device. And then, of course, we're back over here to the stats. So then when we look at our rules, now we can add a new rule or we can edit this. So we'll edit this one, and we'll look at this interface and see exactly what is going on here. Before we do that, notice that it's got the copy rule and the delete rule. And if I click on basic, so you have those 5 items here, but that copy rule, delete rule is not represented by a tab here. Okay, so now we're looking at rule configuration for rule 10. And the description is allow, establish, related. It is enabled with the check mark. The default action, okay, the default action here is to accept. And let's talk a little bit more about these actions. So our default action, drop, will just block the packets and never say anything back to whatever initiated the request. I mean, the packets just basically just die. They drop. If we reject the packets are blocked, and an ICMP message is sent back saying that the destination is unreachable. And then if we accept, then the packets are allowed to come through the firewall. So, and then logging here is if the packets trigger the default action that we want to log those. So, and then under protocol, you can say all protocols, TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, UDP, User Datagram Protocol. TCP, by the way, just a little nugget here, is connection oriented. UDP is not. So UDP, you'll see a lot of jokes out there, memes, things like that. Like, I'll tell you a UDP joke, but I'm afraid you wouldn't get it. That's because UDP doesn't care. It just fires the packets, and if they don't get there, they don't get there. TCP has a lot of things built into it to ensure the packets get there, that they get there in the right order, and it's a completely different animal. You can do both TCP and UDP. Choose a protocol by name or enter a protocol by number. So you could choose, for example, if you saw the video that I did on PPTP and the firewall rules to allow that, so you could choose GRE by name, or you could enter that protocol's number. 47. It's 47. 47. We go to advanced, and the state is the connection state of the packet. So established will match packets that are part of a two-way connection. Invalid matches packets that cannot be identified. New matches packets creating a new connection. And related match packets related to established connections. So established, invalid, new, related. Recent time, if you see these eyes with the gray circles, you get a little tooltip if you hover your mouse over there. So the recent time is the number of seconds to monitor for attempts to connect from the same source. And the recent count is the number of times the same source is detected within the recent time duration. And this can help block attacks that use continual connection attempts. Then IPsec is Internet Protocol Security, and it helps secure packet routing. And so on this, if we don't match on IPsec packets, we're not going to match on those. If we match inbound IPsec packets, we're going to match packets coming into the system. Match inbound non-IPsec packets. We're going to match non-IPsec packets coming into the device. P2P, peer-to-peer. Yeah, your BitTorrent, your Kazaa, your Morpheus, all of those types of things. LimeWire, I'm sure everybody's heard of LimeWire. So we can basically ignore those with none, we can do all, which will match all peer-to-peer connections, or we can choose a peer-to-peer application by name. And if we do that, you'll see, okay, so here you get Apple Juice, eDonkey, Nutella, BitTorrent, Direct Connect, and Kazaa. Or you can specify an application, and these are triggered through DPI. So if you've seen the DPI video, you'll know a little bit more about that. Go back and look at that video if you haven't seen it. But you can create custom categories out of traffic and block those applications. But at a specified interval, your DPI categories automatically get updated by Ubiquiti. So they're always adding things to this. So you could select, top sites adult, and the top adult sites, probably playboy.com is in there. You can match that, and you can create rules based on that. The next thing we're going to talk about is the source. So the address source, so this is where is the traffic coming from? Where's the traffic coming from? The source. And in address, you can, if you come over here to the tooltip, you can see that you can have one IP address, you can have an entire network, or you can do a range. So that's very handy. So if you're going to block one IP, you can see that you just put the IP in. The network would have the CIDR notation, or you could actually specify the range by putting the low end of the range, a hyphen, and then the high end of the range. Okay? So then port, what's the source port? And it's the same thing. So is it FTP? You can put a port number in, or you can do a range. The MAC address is, can you supply the MAC address of the source? So you can even do this based on MAC instead of IP. And you can do address and port at the same time. Then we look at what an address group is. If you've got address groups defined, you could select that here. Or you can specify an interface address. Now you see the interfaces, so over on the dashboard under the interfaces we have addresses tied to these interfaces, so you can just select that here. You saw that when I created the manual DNAT rule, that I just selected ETH0, and it knew that since ETH0 is dynamic, whatever address is on there is what we wanted to use in our NAT rule. Or you can do an entire interface network, so it will then look at that CIDR notation and specify the source as that entire network. You can create network groups over in the firewall NAT groups. I do have a firewall NAT groups video out there. Maybe I'll redo that and update it. And you can also create port groups. So on to destination. So now this is, where is the traffic going? And so you get the exact same options with this as you do the source, except this would be the destination. So you can do a single address, an entire network, or a range. You can also specify a single port by name, by number, or by port range. What's kind of nice is that Ubiquiti allows you to put the port name in, so you don't have to memorize all those. But I will tell you, in the real world, when you're dealing with multiple vendors, I highly recommend knowing probably the first or the most 12, probably 10 or 12 common ports, like what port is HTTPS, that's 443. Which port is DNS? That's 53. Which port is HTTP? That's 80. Just some of those kind of common ports, I would probably still go ahead and memorize those. But it is nifty that they let us just put the name of the port in there, and then they do the heavy lifting for us. So right here is the same options that we had on source, but it's for destination. So you can do groups. You can just do interface addresses or entire interface networks, the network group, and the port group. Then our last tab for the rule configuration is time. So you can actually configure time-based rules. And it's pretty straightforward. So here you would enter days of the month. So you can see in their example it's the 1st, the 15th, and the 22nd. And then you could say match all month days except for these. So then you could reverse it and match everything but the list here. Or you can go on weekdays. So now you can specify, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you could also do that where you would do match all weekdays except for these. So if you had Monday in there, and you said match all weekdays except for these, you would match Tuesday through Sunday. Then you can specify a start date, and you can see that their example there is 9/17 of 2012. You can also specify a start time, and it is in 24-hour notation. I'm kind of a fan of 24-hour notation. I don't know how many people out there use 24-hour. Then the stop date, when do you want this rule to fall off? So they started it on 9/17/2012, and they're going to end it on 9/17/2012, but you could have this run for a day. You could have it run for just hours in the same day. So if you used a start date and time, and that preceded, at least the time would have to precede your stop time, it should let you create that rule. So, and then there's a little checkbox down here. If your network uses UTC, you could check that, and it would interpret the times and dates as UTC. So that's it for the configuration of this rule. And I think that's kind of it for just kind of the overview. And I think in the next video, this video is kind of long, kind of one of my longest videos. We're going on 22 minutes, depends on how much editing there is. But so the next video, we'll actually look at creating some basic rules. And maybe we'll even create some firewall NAT groups to put in there. But if you like the video, please give a thumbs up. This is just the first video in the deep dive of the firewall. I hope it made sense to everybody. Please comment if you've got questions. Please share. Please give a thumbs up. That thumbs up is really important. And of course, subscribe if you're not. And come back for part 2 in the deep dive into the EdgeOS Firewall.